Forget irrational fears. What's your perfectly rational fear? My rational fear is that I'll be that driver someday, who doesn't occasionally glance down to change the radio station, check the map, or pick up a phone call, or have a day when they're a little distracted or not feeling well and know it's affecting their driving, even if it didn't result in an accident, who hasn't driven through a crosswalk only to realize belatedly that there was a pedestrian waiting to walk who they didn't notice, or had the experience of driving through a sudden glare or a heavy rainstorm that impaired their visibility, or had a beer out with office buddies before driving home. Truly drunk driving or reckless speeding are inexcusable, but there are times when I read about a fatal accident and think there by the grace of God go all of us, both as the driver and the victim. Why'd I have to scroll so far to find this comment? I find myself getting more and more uncomfortable driving every single day. It's such a dangerous activity yet a complete necessity in a lot of cases. Around where I live people are very reckless drivers, and it only gets worse as you get closer to the inner cities. I've had one major accident in my life, and I always think back to that accident and think about how fucking close it was to ending my GF who was in the passenger seat or my life, and I barely had control of the situation. There is a YouTube channel called Mr. Ballin. He has a series called Places You're Not Allowed and People Who Went Anyway, and it's just him telling the stories of people who end up in those kinds of terrible situations. People who got stuck in small caves, trapped in chimneys, lost in underwater caves, baked alive in industrial ovens. It's horrifying to imagine the end these people met. Also, I'm never going cave diving. Basal cell carcinoma is about a third of all cancers diagnosed, and around 30% of white people will get it at some point in their life. The good news is it has over a 99% survival rate. Melanoma is also highly treatable if you catch it early. Anyone can get skin cancer, but white folks are most at risk. In short, head to a dermatologist and get your skin checked. There aren't any animals that scare me much. I've gotten mugged, nearly fell to my death and was saved by a small pile of snow. Had to drive on top of a mountain filled with the most slippery mud I'd ever seen on a narrow path with a giant cliff right beside me. But none of these scare me as much as this right here. It's terrifying to think that it's entirely possible that I may never find a goal that will satisfy me and make me happy. Oh God, I had that happen to me last year. I finished work at 9 p.m. and I have a 10-minute walk home. Halfway, I notice there's a man walking behind me, so I turn down my music and pick up my walking pace. At some point, I see my house about 200 meters away and a man speeds past me and carries on up the pathway, whereas I need to turn right to carry on a different pathway. As I turn right, I glanced behind and see the man coming back towards me. So he had to have fully 180 degrees turn around and then take the same pathway as me. I literally never ran so fast in my life. Oh, I can help with this one. My dad had a terrible aneurysm 18 years ago. Right side of his body paralyzed, had to learn to communicate again. Needed round-the-clock care for weeks. I have this really sappy story about how he learned how to walk again in a month. Realistically, his recovery was so long and emotionally exhausting. To a certain extent he's still recovering. He limps. His right hand isn't useless, but it is usually too tight to be able to have much dexterity. He spent a lot of time working on those things. His progress was slowed in the beginning because my former stepmother was a monster and did all sorts of things to keep from recovering until we finally got away from her. He remarried 6 years ago. He's a total gym rat now and is in the best shape of his life. He acts as a mentor and supporter for other people who have suffered life-altering brain injuries. He's different from who he used to be, but in some ways he's a better person for it. Don't get me wrong, he had to go through hell to get to where he is today, but he and I are both so proud of everything he's done and where he is in his life now. My uncle died too, not an aneurysm, but something very similar like a couple other blood relatives. His wife woke up because the TV was still on in the AM hours and shook him in his chair because he looked asleep. No blood, No seizure. Autopsy revealed nothing at all unusual. There's a gene that is carried by those few other relatives that died the same way that my mother doesn't carry, so I, or my brother, can't have it. But it's essentially undetectable until it happens. Just dead. My dad's mom was dead at 44. His father was dead at 50, both brothers were dead by 50 and his sister by 40, every last one of colon cancer. My dad just celebrated his 78th birthday. He was an ultramarathon runner, last pole vaulted at 68, I shit you not, it was hilarious, and had exquisite nutritional habits. That has a huge influence on colon health. He started annual colon screenings at 30. Moral of the story. You might just be whatever it is that plagues your family. Keep up on preventative health care and take good care of your body, and maybe you'll be your family's version of my dad. Don't despair. I wish you a very long, very healthy, very happy life. Smile. I completely understand your fear. I currently have a great life, lots of good friends, I have my own house and car, doing great in my studies, not money issues. I am not bragging. I'm just happy of my life I'm having and realizing it's a spot lots of people would love to be. But when I get home alone, realizing that I am just getting older and that it just makes me harder to meet someone, and also the fearing of hurting someone with my unexperienced approach to love. I am a very cold person. It's strange to me to express affect. Also very shy even to sex jokes. It just embarrassed me the idea of not even understanding why people kisses each other, and having the curiosity to know, but not the guts, or someone, to ask for a kiss. And friends are great, but they are building their families, thing I perfectly understand and I'm happy to. But in the deep of my feelings I envy them a lot. So I got in the shower, turned on the water and looked up, and a gigantic one was on the wall above me. He took off toward me like Mothra in that Godzilla movie. Next thing I knew, it was like I was some MMA fighter in the octagon. I was screaming and thrashing. The towel rack came off the wall, the shower curtain went down. My wife came running in thinking all holy hell had broken loose. We were living in an apartment, and yes, we lost the deposit, but I don't give a damn. There was no getting around it. That was almost 20 years ago and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was friggin' terrifying. Your fear is real, my friend. You never, ever want to be naked in the shower with one of those bastards. Food allergic person commenting. Most of us are glad to repeat which our allergies are if you ask for a reminder, and it's okay if you don't think you have the skill set to accommodate the allergy. Just say so at the earliest opportunity. The people who start drama over this type of thing are hardly ever the ones who would end up in the air. Would much rather hear an honest "not sure I could do that" than get pressured to eat something that might be unsafe. Just give a heads up and I'll bring a mini cooler of safe food. It's your company that's important. I had a daymare while washing a cup and staring out my window where it was a year later and I was standing in the exactly same spot, very happy about something, but we were living through another complete lockdown because of a variant of COVID that was far worse and not even remotely fazed by the current vaccines. I live in Louisiana, so I feel like it was a completely rational pre-deja vu. At least I was happy though. Flying yellow stropy insects, specifically bees. Everyone thinks it's a silly phobia because haha you're afraid of big fat fuzzy bumblebees, but I'm very allergic to bees and I'd prefer not to potentially die, thank you very much. Also yes, bumblebees can sting you. It's considerably harder to provoke them, but they're still capable of attacking you, and can do so multiple times, so stop trying to tell me they're harmless. It sure is a nasty thing to be allergic to bees and wasps. I'm not allergic and got stung once by a bumblebee. It was blown into the car through an open window and crashed into my neck and stung. Got swollen and was lightheaded for a few hours. I find this fear reasonable. I looked up a few things about bumblebees. Got to say, bumblebees will sting you when you go sit on them, so don't do that. Also avoid specifically light blue clothing. It seems to trigger some aggressiveness. I know it sounds ridiculous but is actually true. Another thing is you need to be stung multiple times by bumblebees to trigger an allergic reaction. Still, the stress of being stung when you are allergic may cause symptoms. Not saying that that is irrational or something to just brush off. It is a real threat. I hope you summers are swarm-free and the stripes visit places other than you. Geese. I was at a park with my boyfriend's family a couple days ago and ran into a big old flock of them on the ground by a pond, probably about 20. I kept my distance and said we should go around them. My boyfriend's mom made fun of me for being a wimp and repeatedly said I ain't afraid of no geese. Geese will fuck you up. They're like smaller swans. They're basically cobra chickens. I feel no shame being scared of them. Climate crisis. Seriously, I'd consider myself an old man, and I don't think it's an irrational fear that I'll be alive to see the collapse of ocean and sea life. Major parts of the Amazon rainforest become the Great Amazon Basin Desert, multiple currently habitable regions of the planet being abandoned, mass famines, migrations, and wars. Most people behave like these are things that will happen generations down the line, not things that will begin happening before most nations have their target carbon neutral date, as if limiting carbon emissions at this point can even stop these things from happening in the coming decades. Someone snatching my kid. Even though I know stranger abductions are the more rare form of abduction, it still happens. Whenever we go anywhere, I watch him like a hawk. Even if we're just at a family gathering, I always make sure to pass off responsibility to someone nearby if I have to go to the bathroom or get some food or something. I never just assume that someone is watching simply because we're all family. You just never know if some creep is going to be walking or driving by and happen to see a lone toddler that nobody is watching at the moment. They can be gone in the blink of an eye. I've, female, watched kids in public that I had no connection with because their inattentive parent was making me nervous. One woman was walking 10 or so feet ahead of her crying and barely able to walk daughter and just staring straight ahead for several minutes at them all. Another woman placed her newborn in a car seat in front of her car while she strapped her toddler into the back. Someone could have just walked off with the seat and all, and it would have been at least 2 minutes before she noticed. Having a seizure at home alone and hitting my head could easily be fatal. I've already collapsed into my glass shower door which shattered everywhere and I just came round covered in blood and cuts. Another time I fell into a wall so hard it knocked the tiles off the wall in the adjacent room and dislodged a kitchen cabinet. It's totally rational that my luck will run out one day. And believe me, I've had enough of it, good and bad. I'm training to be a teacher but I currently work as a day camp counselor at a school. We have had to have a talk about what we would do should we have a shooting. I always make sure to look at exits and hiding spots when I enter a room and think about how I'm going to protect the kids. I have never been on the planning, responsible for other lives side of this and it scares me to death. It scares me too, but I would do anything to protect my students. It's a tough talk, but it is good to have. Someone has to stay calm in those emergencies, and it will not be your students. It amazes me that some of my colleagues have never given it a thought, even still, let alone had a discussion about what it means. Teaching is one of the most difficult things a person can do, but is also one of the most rewarding. Watching and helping kids grow into young adults is something I will never give up, no matter how difficult the rest of the bullshit is. Good luck to you with all your future trials. I wish you much success. A person who is passionate about teaching will do a great job. Smile. I was helping out in a kindergarten classroom one time when a lockdown drill started. There were two things going on that really upset me. One, a lot of the 5-year-olds had no idea that it was fake and were crying and afraid. And two, some of them didn't understand the gravity of it and were not being quiet or still, because they were 5 years old. I almost started crying, but I didn't want to scare them more. I love hearing people become heroes in their own minds about surviving a zombie apocalypse, how they're going to do this or that, how they're going to find or build the perfect shelter, and what they'll do to forage and defend themselves against the zombie hordes. Most of my friends can barely cook a decent meal, do their laundry, or do basic vehicle maintenance. A few of them get irrationally upset over minor issues like getting fries instead of the baked potato they ordered. Not total Karen level of upset, but they can't deal and will shun a place over one bad order. It's hilarious how these people think they'll survive an actual apocalypse, when they don't even know how to deal with the grocery store being out of something. I always say, I'll be dead within a week to a month tops, if we ever have to experience anything that horrific. I don't believe in killing. Yes, I eat meat, and maybe it makes me a bad person, because I won't kill an animal to have it in my belly. I don't want to have to fight or murder other survivors to live. I'm not the fastest runner, and though I'm fairly certain I'm not the stupidest person in the world, I'm definitely certain I'm not the smartest. I'm pretty sure that if something as catastrophic as The Walking Dead were to actually occur, I would not be able to handle the stress and fear, and keep my sanity. I also like living indoors. I also like not having to worry constantly. Call me weak, but I'm not sure if I could go on, if I had to take another person's life to survive, or in general. Getting cancer. My mom had bowel cancer. My mom's mom had bowel cancer. My mom's brother died of pancreatic cancer. My dad's mom died of breast cancer. I hate the fact that I live in a small country where not only do people die because it was found too late and they were dismissed, but that there are fuck all treatment options and medications here. You have to have a shit ton of money and go overseas to get a decent level of care. Young families are torn apart by a terminal cancer diagnosis that could have been avoided if there was enough funding for them to have proper testing done in the beginning. Fuck cancer. I used to work in a gym, and when we only had one gender of staff on, we would put a other gender staff member in locker area standing sign in the doorway. Members could still use the restrooms, locker area and showers, but they were made aware. I outright refused to ever be in the ladies' room while we were open. I didn't slack on anything and always did everything diligently, but that's one thing that wasn't negotiable. A shitty hourly wage isn't worth having your life destroyed by someone who wants attention, money, etc. We were doing repair work in the women's locker room at a gym, had no less than 3 different signs up saying things like out of service and closed for remodeling, and had caution tape and plastic sheeting over the door, and a lady still walked in, past all that, and started getting undressed before she noticed there were 4 other people working in the room. She complained at the desk and even called the police saying we were spying on her. The police interviewed us, asked us why we did not make our presence known to her. My boss told the cop that there were 4 men, talking loudly and often over the sound of power tools in a 2-room locker room, changing area, and showers/toilets. What more could we have done to make our presence known? They also had the video from the front desk that showed the lady move one of the barriers we set up at the end of the hallway, walk past it, and move the barrier back in place. We didn't get in any trouble, but I heard that the gym gave her a free 12-month membership. At my work, I work with kids. We have a system in place so that kids don't get into a bad situation, and so the adults also don't. We never have one adult and one child alone ever. There has to be at least 2 kids or 2 adults minimum. This is so the child is never in trouble of something bad happening, but also the adult has a person who was there in case a kid says something suspicious. Kids have active imaginations. Biggest rational fear: that something bad happens, such as a car accident, and I end up in the hospital unable to speak, am incapacitated and can't refuse treatments or interventions that would activate my many medical phobias because I'm afraid I'd go insane. 2. Biggest irrational fear: that something bad happens, such as a car accident, and I end up in the hospital unable to speak, am incapacitated and can't refuse treatments or interventions that would activate my many medical phobias because I'm afraid I'd go insane. 195 views. Police officers: I've experienced psychotic rage from them, firsthand, during minor traffic stops. A few were nice, but most, in my handful of experiences, were over the top and terrifying. It wasn't always the younger ones either. Almost had my arm broken by a cop for a stupid prank that involved a theft, that I was absolutely in the wrong for. Thing is, I had gotten away, but my friend got caught. We were drunk, so when I saw my friend in handcuffs surrounded by cops, I decided to do the right thing and turn myself in. I politely approached them and calmly explained the situation and that I was the actual culprit. I got dogpiled when they started to, one by one, leave the scrum, but still surrounding me. The officer left in control of me, had me on my toes and was behind me with my left wrist across my back almost touching my right shoulder and twisting the hell out of my arm. He was screaming at me for ID. I have an active fear of cops in America, because they act without true oversight and are way too quick to anger and violence. I'm not black, I'm half Asian, and look fairly whitish. I'm not a violent or angry person, but police are not the good guys to me, and it seems, many others, in more than a few countries, unfortunately.